back to the Reisinger build. That's right, we are building this house in partnership with our friends at Builders FirstSource and showing you all the steps. But on this episode, I gotta tell you, this is one of my favorite topics. We're talking about insulation today, and we got a lot to talk about. We kind of did this house in a little bit of a show house fashion, so I could really show off different types of insulation, why we might use one versus another. We're gonna dive into spray foam, into bats, into blown-in insulation. All the products we're gonna be using on today's video are from Owens Corning. They obviously make a ton of different options, and we're gonna be showing you why and how. We're also gonna jump into sound bats as well and sound transmission in the house, and I'm gonna answer the age-old question, closed cell versus open cell spray foam. The Reisinger Build Insulation episode, sponsored by Owens Corning, in partnership with BFS. Let's get going.
A Build original series, in partnership with Builders FirstSource. The Reisinger Build.
Okay, y'all, before we jump into the house and show you what's going on, we've got the spray foam truck here, and let's talk generally about insulation first. Obviously, you need to finish all of your inspections, right? I need my plumbing, mechanical, and electrical, as well as framing to pass from your city jurisdiction before you can move on to the insulation phase. But when it comes to insulation, if you're doing spray foam, you typically want the spray, not typically, you always want the spray foam to go in first before you might do any bad insulation or blown insulation. Now in this particular house, we're using a brand new product. Well, I shouldn't say brand new. New to Owens Corning. Actually, it's a product that's been on the market for a little while. But Owens Corning acquired a company called Natural Polymers a while back that I've actually used this product before. We're gonna be spraying closed cell spray foam on this job. And I said earlier, I wanna answer this question, open cell versus closed cell, why we might use one versus another. But first, let's talk about our strategy overall, and then I'll jump into that. So on this particular house, my exterior walls are all 2x4 construction. And on a 2x4 wall, we want to get the highest R value as possible out of those walls because we just don't have a lot of thickness for insulation. Now, if you've seen our other episodes, we have also some exterior insulation. We used Zip R on the walls, and this happens to be R6. So I have basically a continuous R6 around all the walls, and that's really why I'm able to get away with only using a 2x4 wall with cavity insulation, because I've got that R6 on the outside continuous first. Now in the roof line, if you watched our other episodes, I have an R22 on top of my roof. We use some Atlas exterior insulation, which means that in my attic, I don't need to go quite as high. Now, if you look at most Texas homes, or really most homes in this neighborhood, they have traditional blown insulation at the ceiling line in the attic. The problem with that, though, is their mechanicals, meaning their HVAC system, their ductwork, is outside of that insulation envelope. And one of the keys when it comes to insulation is we want all our mechanicals within that conditioned space. We're in Texas, we're slab on grade here. I don't have a basement, I don't have a crawl space, which means that we've got a lot of mechanicals that are getting pushed up into the attic. Whether there's a actual machine up there or not, if there's ductwork in the attic, we really want that ductwork to be within the conditioned space. So that means we're gonna be spraying our roof line with insulation. Now, I've done a lot of spray foam at roof lines over the years. It's really kind of an easy way to really bump up the efficiency of a house. But we're doing a little bit differently on this house. You know, we monopoly framed this house, so we were already starting with a very tight envelope on this house. Then when we come in with that spray foam and spray it at the roof line and onto the gable walls, we're encapsulating that attic. So this attic has no outside ventilation for the attic space like you might see in a neighbor's house or in a traditional Texas house. All those mechanicals now are in that air-conditioned envelope. The beauty of spray foam is that we can spray it right to the roof deck, right to those gable walls, and that spray foam is gonna stick, right? It's gonna land on there and stick in those locations. I don't need to worry about how do I pin up, let's say, a traditional bat insulation, or if I was gonna do blown insulation, how do I form a blanket up against that roof deck? Because we really want that insulation touching that outside sheathing. So with spray foam, it makes it much, much easier. Let's talk about open cell versus closed cell for a moment. If you're in the north where we're worried about really big temperature extremes, you know, it might be 10 degrees out in the winter or it might be 100 degrees out in the summer, closed cell is really a fantastic way to go because it has a natural vapor barrier built into the foam. Moisture and vapor is not going to transmit through that closed cell foam, whereas open cell foam, because it's open, kind of think of like a kitchen sponge, moisture can move through it, right? If I get a wet kitchen sponge and leave it on the counter, it's going to dry overnight because that moisture can dry through that sponge. That sponge has open pore cells. Closed cell would not do that. So in the South, we actually can use open cell without a problem because anything that might slow down vapor transmission is going to be on the outside of the house. We don't want anything on the inside of the house slowing down that vapor transmission. We're not going to use any kind of vapor barrier. We're going to make sure that we're always using paint on the inside of the house, that it's vapor open, that we can dry to the inside. And that's because in the South, and particularly in climate zone 1, 2, and 3A, we have pretty mild winters. It hardly gets below freezing, if ever. And 90% of the year we're running our air conditioner, which means we're always drying to the inside. So we don't want to prevent that or stop that drying. Now here's the deal. In the past, I've heard people say, hey, we only want to use open cell in our roof line because if I get a roof leak, I want that water to drip through and see it. In my mind, that's a little bit of a misnomer. If you get a roof leak, it doesn't matter what kind of spray foam you have, it's going to be bad for you. We want to prevent those roof leaks and take all our precautions necessary to make sure that roof doesn't leak. But you actually would notice it typically with closed cell. There's going to be a spot that it's going to find a way through if that roof were actively leaking, even if you have closed cell at the roof line. So I am a big fan of going to closed cell in roof lines. I get a much higher R value per inch, and overall I get better air sealing with closed cell versus open cell foam. I've found over the years that in attics that I've built, it's much easier for pests to get through when I have open cell foam. And I like this idea of having somewhat of a vapor throttle at the attic line. With open cell foam up to my attic line, I'm worried that if I had high humidity in that attic, I actually could have some amount of vapor that would transfer through the foam and onto my roof deck, especially if that roof was cold. So I don't want to worry about that. It's one of the reasons why I really like closed cell foam. I think it's the way to go. Remember though that closed cell foam is more expensive. You're going to end up using quite a bit more chemical because it's a real thick, rigid foam. They call it 2-pound foam compared to half-pound foam, which is open cell foam. So when you get your bid back from the insulator, that usually stops people from going to closed cell. But I think this is a much better way to go. The other nice thing about closed cell, it's going to add some rigidity to the house. You'll see these guys when they're spraying that closed cell, if we come back later and poke on it, it feels really rigid. Every builder is familiar with polyurethane glues, right? We use that in our woodworking, and we know that that's a really strong glue. The spray foam that's closed cell that we're using at the attic is very similar to that polyurethane glue, where it's got a lot of rigidity and it really locks things together. So it's going to give me that extra hold down power of locking that roof down from high wind areas. It's going to make sure that my roof and my walls aren't racking when we've got some kind of crazy wind events. It just gives me a lot more strength. In fact, some engineers will even give you an additional value when it comes to those strengths. So having closed cell has a lot of benefits. With that being said, let's transition to the inside of the house and let's talk about some of the walls and what product we're using where. Okay, y'all, let's talk about what we're using where. I just walked in from the garage. This is the kind of laundry room area. Let's walk into the kitchen. This wall in the kitchen separates the garage from the living area, from the kitchen space. This is a whole bank of cabinets. I got a kitchen sink here. And you're gonna notice as you walk through the house that we put cards up to say, here's what type of insulation we're using where. It's a little unusual that we'd have 3 different types, or in this case, really 4 different types of insulation or 4 different insulation products. But let's talk about why we used where, what product where. And also, remember, every product has some pluses and some minuses, so we need to think about both cost, R value, and one thing that we're going to think about in this wall in particular is the additional air sealing ability. So on this wall, we called it out as closed cell spray foam in this particular wall. Now we framed this wall in a 2x6 because I've got a bunch of plumbing on this wall. I knew that this was a kitchen wall, so kitchen walls we typically, even if the rest of the house is framed 2x4, where I've got plumbing, we're gonna deepen that wall and go to a 2x6. But this wall, one thing we did in the framing that I'm really proud of that I want you guys to think about is this wall was fully sheathed with zip system sheathing. In fact, we use Zip R from the garage all the way up through continuous before my trades came, which meant that where you see I've got pipes and wires, I've got my both my makeup air for the range and my exhaust for the range poking through that wall. That zip was up first, so those guys had to drill a hole, so now I can seal those holes. And this is where spray foam comes in. In particular, closed cell, now open cell would work as well, but closed cell is even better, is gonna do a really good job of air sealing around all those penetrations and making sure that this connection between the house and the garage is as tight as possible. Our garages are not someplace we'd wanna throw a bed and live, right? When you pull your car in, your fumes from your car, if it's a standard combustion engine, those fumes are still trapped in the garage for some period of time. People are storing gasoline and other chemicals in the garage. So typically your air quality in the garage is not great. So we want a really good air seal between the house and the garage, and closed cell is a great way to go in that location. Now as we walk back in the house a little bit further, you're gonna notice we continued the closed cell in this wall, but this is only a 2x4 wall. Now closed cell, one of the reasons why we like closed cell is it's such a high R value per inch. In particular, this Owens Corning Natural Polymers is a R7 per inch. We're gonna spray a nominal 2.5, 3 inches on these walls. So I'm getting somewhere around an R15, 16, 17 in this 2x4 stud bay. That's a really high value and I really like that. But the other thing I want to mention is you can see here where I've got roof trusses and this section in the kitchen where I've got floor trusses ending. That is a really good spot to consider closed cell or open cell foam because traditional batt insulation is not going to stick to that wall. And in particular, this wall right here, look at all those mechanicals through there. I've got all these wires, I've got all this blocking, I've got pipes going through there. If I were to try to fit a batt in there or try and figure out a way to do blown-in insulation in there, it'd be really hard to get a full continuous insulation through there. But you're gonna notice when the spray foam guys come through there, they're gonna be able to spray foam that complete. It's gonna stick to that outside wall. That's a terrific place to use spray foam. Another area as we walk this direction, you notice I've got this outside porch. And if you look up into this attic above me, I got a light up there stage so you can kind of see it. The roof trusses extend out over top of this Pella door here where that LVL header is. And that's actually part of my conditioned attic space. So by running that spray foam onto the roof, they're actually gonna also run that spray foam onto the soffit. Now we fully sheathed and taped that with zip system tape so that we could run a blower door and really get that as tight as possible. I don't want to rely on spray foam for its air tightness, even though it does do that. I want to try and get everything as tight as possible at the zip system layer on the outside first. And then the spray foam is adding that belt or adding that suspenders when I've already got a belt on. So the guys are going to spray the roof, they're going to spray that soffit area. This whole attic space above me is going to be completely encapsulated with that closed cell spray foam. At the roof line, I think we're spraying 4 inches roughly of closed cell foam. So I'm going to meet code with my 4 inches on the inside, and then my exterior insulation is going to get me that much higher on code. As we come back this wall here, this wall is also closed cell foam because this is a shear wall for me. If you saw our previous videos, I've got some Simpson straps down here and down on the outside. that turn this wall into a big shear wall. And you'll notice that header goes all the way across here from side to side. If you look at that whole back gable here as a wide shot, it means that this wall here is helping with racking strength, but I've got these windows in the way which take away from that racking strength. So my engineer specified some Simpson straps in the foundation. This is fully sheathed with zip sheathing. So putting that spray foam in here is going to give me that extra measure of strength. It's really going to lock everything down on this outside wall that's giving that extra measure of protection. So that's why we went with the extra expense of doing closed cell spray foam here. Now this wall over here, this one's labeled as batt insulation. Don't be fooled by this. This is just keeping the spray foam out of this bay as they're spraying above. They wanted to make sure they kept my plumbing, my, let's see, I think I've got an HVAC line set right here. They want to make sure that the spray foam was kept off those. So this is going to come off later. This is just protection. But we're going to use some standard batt insulation. That's going to be my least cost insulation. This is a 2x6 exterior wall. And this wall in particular also has exterior insulation on it. I've got 3 inches of Atlas polyiso rigid insulation on the outside. So that plus this cavity insulation means this is a really well insulated wall. If you're in the north, if you're building a house in climate zone, 5 or above, this would be a terrific way to build. So by the way, these plans are available for this particular house on the Builders FirstSource plan site. It's bldrplan.com. So if you're interested in building this house or building my personal house, those plans are on there. They have like 100+ additional plan sets you can buy. Now as we come around the house, follow me, let's keep going this way. Okay, so we're in the master bedroom, the primary bedroom, whatever you want to call it. We did another wall differently here. This wall, 2x6 construction. We're going to be doing blown-in insulation. I really like blown-in insulation. In my mind, this is an upgrade. It is typically a little bit more expensive than batt insulation. There's a lot of benefits. We'll get into that later. I actually have the Owens Corning rep coming later to talk about that. But the nice thing about blown-in insulation is I'm not worried about the guys cutting the insulation, fitting around the wire. It just makes everything easy. We're going to put a big net on this wall. They're going to blow in that insulation, and it's going to form basically a perfect blanket of insulation in this stud bay. As a side note, we did triple glazed windows on this section of the house as well. Check out our Pella episode for all about the Pellas, but just a quick point on these. These look the same as the rest of the house. These are push-out casements, which I'm a big fan of. I've got a push-out casement for egress here, and then I've got a fixed window here. Check out the U-factor here. This is a 0.23 U-factor. So this window is an R5, and this window is closer to R4 point something, which is even better than our double glazed windows when it comes to insulation value. Now moving on to the master. 2x4 wall, again that zip bar on the outside. We're going to do blown in here as well. So I'm going to get a really perfect blanket, but I only have 3.5 inches of insulation compared to this wall, which is going to have 5.5 inches. Again, something to think about. If we're in those northern climates, we want to think about higher R values. And in general, when it comes to insulation, I'm always thinking about how could I get as close to 50% better than what code dictates for me so that I can make sure that I've got a house that's going to be future-proof, right? I don't want a house to be built and then 3 years later codes change and all of a sudden this house wouldn't meet new codes even though it's a 3-year-old house. So that's why I'm always thinking, hey, how can I get to that higher level? And remember to think about exterior insulation as well. This is breaking that thermal bridge. If I only had a 2x4 wall and I didn't have any exterior insulation, I would not meet code in my climate here, even down here in Austin, Texas. So especially for others in more northern climates, think about that exterior insulation and then think about what type of insulation you're using. With that being said, let's get the spray foam guys to get rolling today, finish up this roof line, then we'll pick it back up. We'll talk about a few other things, and I've got the Owens Corning rug coming. Day 3, we are rocking over here at the Reisinger build. Let me show you a couple things that have been done, and let's talk about some things that are about to be done. So if we didn't make it clear earlier, we put signs on the wall, what we were doing where. And I think I talked about this already, but anything separating the house from garage, this is worth saying again, even if I said it, we really like that closed cell foam because we're gonna be able to really seal up, especially all those penetrations. And again, I really like how we were able to put the zip system sheathing up prior to any of the garage framing. So there's no, basically from the outside of that zip facing, which is on the other side of this wall, there's nothing that's penetrating through that structurally in terms of wood members where I'm worried about air sealing. On the other hand, I've still used closed cell foam here to be extra vigilant. And then any of the framing that's on the other side, we use some Simpson lags to lag those through structurally. Now over here where they're done spraying on this wall, you can really see, look how nice that is. These guys did a real nice job. In this section here, I'm gonna use my shadow as the pointer. In this section here, this is that area where the trusses come down, and that's commonly referred to as the raised heel portion of the truss. Look how that spray foam comes down and actually touches that top plate right there. And then we got a nice solid 4 inches of foam right there at the roof deck. We've got good insulation value in these areas. And then this area over here is one that really makes me happy to see. If you get up on a ladder and look down into this space, you're gonna see that we spray foamed that entire soffit area. So this is all attic portion. That looks really, really good. We also spray foamed the gable over here. That's this end right here. And then something that I want to make mention of that's not really insulation related, but it's a little bit future proofing. Let's walk over to this corner here. This block out that you're seeing, that's just a piece of standard OSB right there. That's a block out for this future access panel. These, I really like these. These are made by Odie. They're like 10 bucks on Amazon. I'm sure you could buy this in any plumbing supply house. This is a little beefy. This is really the only one that's in any kind of an open area. But I figure by the time we get our base and casing on, put our furniture in, this will really be hidden in the back corner. But what this is doing is, you see this pipe coming down on this back wall? That connection behind here is where my Aqua hose bib comes in and connects with this piping. The water actually shuts off well into the wall. And that in some respects is a replaceable part. It's gonna be a long time. I figure we're at least 25 or maybe 30 plus years before that'll need to get replaced. But someday it will need to get replaced. And I'm making it easy on the future owners by having this access panel. So what I've done was we measured this dimension from side to side here. And actually, I don't know what this is. I don't have my tape on me, but let's call that 14 inches. So what I did here was I made this slightly bigger, maybe 14 and a half. And now when the sheetrock guy comes, he'll sheetrock right up to this and stop. And then later I'll unscrew this and I'll glue this panel on. And now I've got an easy access panel to get that. Now another thing I like to do in the meantime though is I brought my Sharpie and my Post-it extreme notes. So I'm going to take a second here, pardon my interruption, and I'm going to say block out for OD access panel 14 by 14. And I'm going to throw that on here so that the drywall guys or another project manager, if I'm on vacation, whatever, everybody knows, okay, boom, I'm good to go. I got to say, no affiliation with these guys, but these Post-it note extremes are very handy. They're extremely handy, pun intended. So I'll put that there, and believe it or not, that note will still be there weeks, months from now, and I could do the same thing outside of these too, so these are really nice. Now this wall in particular is a 2x6 wall, and we're just using standard batt insulation there. This wall is going to get kind of the least cost R value on this 2x6. And remember, this is the wall in the family room that I kind of framed as my northern wall. So this has 3 inches of outside insulation on it. So by the time I add my probably R19 batts on the inside, I could probably go up to an R21 batt, kind of depending on what we're using here. I'm going to have a really, really big R value. This is going to be or 35 or so on this wall. Let's keep walking because I want to show you in the master bedroom over here how we've prepared for some blown insulation. So as we walk around the corner here, you'll see that this wall is blown insulation, and the guys put the netting up early. So we haven't actually blown this yet, but the netting's up, so we'll be able to blow this wall. Now this is only a 2x4 wall, and one of the things that I really like about blown insulation is it's going to make a perfect insulation bat for this wall because that insulation is going to form around the wires. With that being said, I think the spray foam crews are ready to get back in here. We've got a couple more areas for them to hit, and then we should finish up our spray foam today and move on to our blown, and probably that crew is going to arrive tomorrow. So stay tuned. Let's let these guys get back to work. All right, y'all, let me introduce you to Will from Hill Country Insulation. Will, appreciate you being on the job. You guys have done a lot of good insulation for me over the years, but I gotta tell you, I am psyched to have you spraying today because you're using a product which is one of my absolute favorites that I recommend more than anything out there. What are you guys spraying today?
Today, we love this product. It is a Owens Corning. It's their new spray foam by Natural Polymers. It's a closed cell spray foam that we love. It has been kicking butt, and it's awesome right now. We're getting about 7 R value per inch. So yeah, that's pretty sweet. And you're getting your vapor barrier, you're getting a nice air seal. It's got low VOCs.
Yeah, so this is some kind of bio-based blowing agent. I don't know the secret sauce, but I will tell you that this product's been around for a while. Owens Corning acquired Natural Polymers a couple years ago, I don't know when. I've sprayed this before, I love it. This is a really cool product. But I think one of the things that's most interesting for me about it, Will, is it's very low VOC. And so when you're on the job site or near the job site, there's not a lot of off-gassing smell. And the next day, there's zero smell. I did another house in the neighborhood here a couple of years ago, and they actually, Natural Polymers had a guy around doing some VOC testing, and the guy was literally shocked at how low the scores were, both during the spraying, like an hour after, and the very next day. Crazy, crazy low. So really low global warming potential. I think they actually say in the brochure, 0 ODP, which is an ozone depletion potential. That's a mouthful to say. The point is, this is a very different spray foam than I've seen out there. I really like it. And I got to tell you, I like closed cell, even though we're in a market that typically sprays open cell. Let's talk about the differences between the two for a minute, if you don't mind, Will.
Yeah.
Why do most people in Texas use open cell compared to closed cell?
So right now, the open cell, most residential applications, we're going to be spraying roof decks and walls too. And that way it's going to be behind your sheetrock. Yep. You don't need a vapor barrier, so to speak. It's not exposed to the elements as much. Yep. That being said, though, you get less of an R value per inch.
Yeah, do you happen to know what the open cell R value per inch is?
It's a 3.8.
Okay, so it's about half, let's say. Now we're a little, we have a bit of a bump on R value on this job because I've got rooftop insulation. I've got some Atlas polyiso deck mounted foam on top of the roof. So I got R22 before you guys even arrived today. And then how many inches are we spraying underneath the roof?
We're spraying a nominal 4 inches. So you're getting about an R28 at minimum and R30 at most up there.
So we're going for an R50 roof. One thing that I think people need to know when they're using spray foam is you want to still meet code R values. Even though your spray foam is typically a better type of insulation because you've got better coverage, it's actually sticking to things. So don't go down on your R value, whatever code is for your area. And I would say on my jobs, I typically like to go for something like 50% better than code for both my walls and my roof. And that's really where I am on my roof deck. I'm about 50% more than what code requires for me. Now, a couple benefits of closed cell. You mentioned this briefly. Closed cell is a vapor barrier product. Open cell will move moisture through it. The nice thing about a closed cell product is that you don't have to worry about, do I have the vapor barrier on the wrong side? This is a little bit more for my northern climate folks than my southern climate folks, but in particular in Texas, with closed cell in the wall or the roof, we need to make sure that the walls, number one, don't get wet no matter what insulation you've got. I don't care if it's bat, blown, whatever. We don't want moisture to get into those walls, liquid water that is. But next up, there are days, even in Texas, where it's 15 degrees out, and a vapor barrier on the inside would be the right thing for a day when it's 15 degrees out, but the wrong thing most other times of the year when we've got a higher temperature outside. So in Texas, we don't do any type of vapor barrier on the inside. Don't be fooled by this. This is just protection. This is not vapor barrier plastic. We're just protecting the space from spray foam. We wouldn't want to do any vapor barrier on the inside in Texas. In the north, though, we would want some type of vapor retardant, right? Not a barrier, but a retardant to slow down that vapor flow through the walls, especially in the winter time in a northern climate. So the nice thing about closed cell foam is once we spray that in the wall cavity or the roof line, we don't need to worry about that vapor barrier. It kind of does it for us. On open cell, if you were to use that in the north, you would have to think about, hey, how am I going to retard vapor flow through that open cell if you're in the north? If you're in the south, don't put anything on it. We don't want any vapor barrier. We don't want anything to stop that house from drying to the inside because we're air conditioning and dehumidifying 10 out of the 12 months during the course of the year. Now, Will, we're using a bunch of other products too on this house. We've got this wall right here, which is labeled as bat insulation. We've got some blown insulation. We've got some sound bat insulation. Give me the basics on what else we've got going on in the house.
Yeah, so spray foam is a little more noisy, I like to say. So the sound does bounce around a little bit more. So I always recommend at least doing your bedrooms, bathrooms, your kind of your major traffic ways, so to speak, getting some sound insulation in that.
Yeah, great.
Same thing, we use Owens Corning EcoBat for that as well.
Okay, cool.
And then in the walls, we're putting our blown in L77 is what we call it.
Cool.
And yeah, we're putting up a mesh layer and then pumping our loose fill insulation through that way. So you get a nice snug fill through there, and then you still get that R15 in that exterior wall.
Love it. So let's talk schedule a little bit. We started with spray foam. Why did we start there versus starting with bats or some other type of insulation?
So our spray foam, generally there's going to be a bit of an overspray when you are spraying.
Yeah.
So making sure we get a nice seal around all of our top plates, everything as well too. We don't want to have a bat in the way that we're trying to move around. And then that's generally our kind of steps. We'll go with air sealing, then spray foam. Then we'll do bats and blown if need be.
Right.
And then.
So always start with the spray foam.
Yes,
basically.
sir. Yes, sir.
Something I want to mention too, Will's guys have done, first off, an amazing job of protection. These walls we wouldn't normally protect, but we're doing this kind of hybrid approach to show you guys all the different types of insulation and why we're using them. But we also had them go a little extra mile. We don't always see this. We had them protect the floors. You know, the overspray from spray foam is going to stick really well, and it's not that this is my finished floor, but I'm a big fan of spending a little extra on protection. So I made sure that when Will bid the job for me, I said, hey, we want to spend a little extra time. I mean, we spent the better part of a day getting everything covered and protected. The same goes with my attic. If you were to pan around in the attic and see what it looks like up there, these guys did a terrific job covering my ductwork, covering any mechanicals that I've got up there when it comes to my ERVs. In this attic here, we even have our internet in place for the house already. So these guys covered all that and did a real nice job, because really anything that spray foam lands on, it's gonna stick. In fact, as a side note, years ago when I did some video in a house with spray foam, one of my very first jobs, I changed lenses on my camera. Some spray foam stuck to my mirror, and from that point, or my sensor, I should say, that camera was ruined, basically. I ruined a pair of sunglasses a couple years ago because I got overspray on it. So don't be in the house where the guys are spraying. That's not wise. You don't want that landing on you. You're gonna notice the guys when they're spraying, they're fully masked off. Their entire body is covered. They've got a respirator on because there is some off-gassing that happens. Even a low VOC product has some off-gassing. But remember that off-gassing is very quick. So in general, when we're done spray foaming, We throw open all the windows and doors in the whole house. We want to air the house out for at least 24, 48 hours, get anything that's accumulated out. But what you'll notice, if I could put smell-o-vision on tomorrow, if you came over here, you're not going to smell a thing in this house, especially with this product. But in general for spray foam, 24, 48 hours later, that smell is really going to be gone. I do want to mention though, as a side note, I think that spray foam has gotten a bit of a bad rap from some random horror stories out on the net. There's always going to be somebody somewhere that had a bad spray foam job. There is a little bit of science and a little bit of art that goes on this. If you look at their truck out there, there's two big 50-gallon drums of a Part A, Part B. And these guys on site are trained by Owens Corning specifically to make sure that we get that mix correct, that everything is right when they spray it. That's really important. I mean, there's an actual mixing of chemicals that happens in the nozzle that then when that gets sprayed onto the wall, it kind of mushrooms out. More mushrooming happens with the open cell. There's a lot more expansion. There's a lot more air in the mix than on the closed cell. But back to my point, don't be afraid of spray foam. I've used it for years. I've never had a problem. We do want a trained crew. Hill Country's gone through all the training. This is not a fly-by-night operation, and I know specifically the chemical they're spraying, and I do think it makes a big difference specifying. When Will was actually bidding this job, I said, natural polymers, this specific brand. So he knew that's the set I'm gonna buy. And remember that closed cell also is more expensive than open cell. And one thing to remember too is if you're in the South, open cell tends to get used the most because it's a lesser cost than closed cell. So there's a bit of a pain in the butt factor for Will and his crew if I'm saying do closed here and open here and switch and do this. Whereas on this job, the only spray foam we're spraying is closed cell. It's gonna yield a more efficient crew than if they have to switch out. Because if they're switching between open and closed, Will's got to make sure that everything is purged from the gun. There's a lot of maintenance. It's not like a 15-minute job, right? I mean, it could take you 2 or 3 hours to switch over from one product to the next,
Yeah, it takes about 2 hours. Even though the A side is going to be the same, the B side will be different.
Okay.
So we still got to purge out everything from there. The closed cell tends to kind of harden up a little bit quicker in the line itself. So we get all the debris out, we flush it, and then we also do a little test spray too to make sure before we hop back in and start going after it.
That's right, and as a side note too, I mean, we need good conditions for this. We can't spray it if the house is 10 degrees, right? We gotta have heat in the house. These studs need to be at kind of room temperature. So we need this job site to be somewhat normal. And the same goes with the chemical set, right? They gotta store this in a conditioned space. They gotta heat the truck if it's real cold outside. So there's a lot that goes into this. When you see that spray foam bid and there's a cost involved in that compared to bad insulation, there's a lot that goes into that. But I think my point here is I'm a big fan of this particular product. And when people ask me about which spray foam to use, I always specifically mention this particular product. Yes, this is a sponsored video, but regardless of that, I've been promoting this product for a long time. I really like it. Oh, yeah. Will, thank you for the hard work, my friend.
Thank you.
Let's let these guys get back to work, and we're going to come back and show you the different types and places where to use this insulation. All right, guys, let me introduce you to Trey from Owens Corning. Trey, super fun project out here. We're utilizing a little bit of everything from the Owens Corning catalog. Let's talk to these guys about why we've chosen really 3 very distinct different lines of insulation from you guys. So first off, let's start on the natural polymers. Yeah. So this is a company, I said earlier in the video, this is a company you guys acquired a couple years ago. I love this product. I think this is a great acquisition by you guys. We use closed cell here, but they also make it an open cell. Sure do. And so depending on where or what you need, you're gonna make a decision of what to use. Now on this job, Trey, this wall here is a shear wall, so we decided to use it here. We use it through the entire roof line, and then I used it between the house and garage. And then the last place that I use it, that I'm a big fan of using spray foam in general, is the band joist area, you know, where my trusses come to the outside. Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, it's a great product for that. You know, Owens Corning had not been in spray foam for many years. And we realized that there's absolutely a place and a need for that product.
Yep.
And that's when we decided to buy Natural Polymers, which was the perfect fit for our company.
Perfect fit.
So what you just highlighted are the absolute perfect applications of spray foam and why we need it part of our portfolio and why builders like you use it in the right locations.
That's right, and this is a premium product, don't get me wrong. This is up there on the cost scale. These are trained installers. This is a top-notch product that's probably up there on the product cost for a set of this material. And the guys that sprayed it, you can tell the difference, right? This is a really pretty spray job, very uniform. I got 4 inches on my roof deck. They sprayed it down onto the top, above my top plates. So I've got great insulation, I've got great air sealing, and because this is a polyurethane product, I get that extra structural benefit, kind of like we all think of Gorilla Glue as being this really good woodworker's glue. I think of this as being a little bit like that. It really locks the house in place. And that's why, Trey, I used it also on this wall here, which is a shear wall, to get that extra shear. Now, my engineer didn't take that value into account, although I believe that they can do that. So this is really just that extra insurance to make sure the house is as solid as I could get it.
Yep, absolutely. And you see it a lot in hurricane areas as well for that exact purposes.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, we went with the lowest cost option right behind us. Let's talk through that. This is actually this product right here.
Yeah, this is our horse, you know. This is pink next gen fiberglass insulation.
Yep.
And you can see it here. It's iconic. It's pink. It's probably one of the most well-known brands in all of building materials.
Oh, it's got to be the most well-known. Yeah. The Pink Panther, for sure.
Now, this is a great product. It's the value level.
Yep.
It's going to get you to code. It's going to provide high performance for what you're trying to do. And if you do things with air sealing like caulks and can foam, and you did exterior, you're still going to get an extremely high-performing wall.
That's right. It made sense to use the lowest cost product from the Owens Corning catalog, really, which would be this R19 in a 2x6 wall. So if you're building a house in Minnesota and Michigan, this is a great wall. I've got R19 in my stud bays, and then check out our other videos. We did 2 layers of 1.5 inch exterior insulation, which is required in a good majority of jurisdictions these days. Anything that's building to the 2021 code typically is gonna see an exterior insulation requirement. But what I love, Trey, is that we're using a really good product, using the least cost product, and doing it in a smart way.
Yeah, well, the way we talk about it is the right product for the right application.
Yep.
And you've got the perfect build here to show 3 different wall installations for 3 different applications.
That's right.
And that's why we're here. We're not just trying to sell spray foam. We're not just trying to sell bats. We're working with builders and contractors to deliver the solutions that they need.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, tell us about this next gen. You know, if you notice the bag here, it says pink next gen fiberglass. What's the next gen portion of this mean?
So next gen, so what we did was really reinvent the way the fibers are made. And what you get from that is soft insulation. That's right, soft insulation.
All right.
You get, it recovers better. And it also splits and cuts better, which these guys installing it really appreciate.
Yeah, so when they slice it and pop it after a slice, in other words, it's coming apart more easily. You don't see it. You don't see much of that kind of sawtooth look afterwards. Am I saying that right?
Exactly. So what you want in a bat when you split around a wire is to be able to grab it at the end, pull it wide, slip it behind in front of the wire to completely fill the cavity. Yeah. If your bat is not made with our technology, you might run into situations where you pull it and it just rips off. Right. And that just adds to time, and we've already got labor challenges in the market. Sure. As well as, you know, you want to give them a product that recovers and fills the cavity so they can pass inspection and really achieve the results that the homeowner wants.
I got to brag on this Hill Country Clear. They did this bay right behind me, Trey. I'm gonna ruin their work for a second to show you. Check this out. They cut around this outlet, but look what they did for my AC line set back there. They split the bat down, dropped it in on both sides, and then cut a bat in half and dropped it in. I mean, this is textbook. Really, really nice install. And honestly, sometimes I've in the past given standard bats a bad rap because this isn't always done perfectly, right?
Right.
Which is a good entree to say, hey, let's go check out the other part of the house where we're doing blown in. If we walk around the corner here to the primary bed, outside wall framed with 2x4s and a zip R6 continuous insulation. You'll also notice I had the guys do closed cell foam at the band joist area, which I really like. We could have batted that and that would have absolutely been acceptable. But you know that closed cell that sticks, that's really a hard spot to use bat insulation.
Yep.
So I like that. On the other hand though, talk to me about why people might consider this blown-in option from you guys.
Yeah, so the ProPaint Complete blown-in wall system is what I would do in my own home. It is gonna give you really good thermals, a little bit higher than bats, because you get the density. It's gonna give you airflow resistance, so some air sealing properties, and really good acoustics for a very fair price for its performance.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a step up, but nowhere near what, let's say, had we closed cell foam this wall. And I really like this. I mean, we've got a total fill in here. And in the last room, I kind of showed how the installer did a great job on that line set. But if a line set was in this wall, it would perfectly encapsulate it, right?
Yeah, and
there's a little less installer, you know, perfection that we need to worry about.
Absolutely, it's gonna go around every box, wire, pipe, line set, yeah, electrical
Here's a
box.
great example of that, yeah. When that electrical box is in, it's perfectly forming a bat around that and also the wire that's in there.
A custom fit for every cavity. And if you've seen some of the 2x4s and lumber that is out today, you know not every cavity is perfect.
Very true.
Great product, and installers love it too. If you get a complex wall, this can actually be faster for installers because they're not having to cut and split and do all the things that they do to get that good install.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So had this been bats, we might have used our R13 bats in this wall, but because we went into this blown-in blanket, we're probably getting something more like R15, R14 in there, just a little bit more, you know, maybe 10% higher R value in this wall. Which in the long run makes a difference. And let's actually talk about that for a minute. You know, Trey, when I talk to builders at conferences, I'm typically saying that builders should shoot for something like 25 to 50% better than what code calls for on their insulation value. And the big reason I say that is, number one, you're not gonna get back and re-insulate your walls for at least 50 or 100 years. And number two, we want to have some amount of future proofing, right? If this house resells in 10 years, how nice would it be to say, oh yeah, we meet code currently because we did this higher level and we know those codes are going to continue to ratchet up.
And additionally, Matt, there are often utility rebates. There are federal government rebates to builders for going above code. So sometimes there's money on the table to be doing things right.
That's great.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll mention on that too, Trey, that I always like to talk about is forget code, forget energy savings or ROI. It's all about comfort. And we're in the primary bedroom, you know, the bed's right here. Mom and dad are laying down their heads every night right here. How nice is it to have this room not have a bunch of heat transfer or cold transfer through the walls? We actually upgraded to triple glazed windows in this room for that reason. No one wants to get out of bed on a cold winter's day and feel that heat radiating off their body. So the same goes to the walls. Let's go that extra step. Let's go to that higher insulation value. And this is a great product because it's really well priced. Not much more than bats, but certainly less than a spray foam. We get a total insulation value. I really like it. This is a great choice.
Yeah, I can tell you went all out here in the master. You've got acoustic insulation on all the walls. The people in this room are going to be comfortable and they're going to sleep well.
That's right. Let's talk acoustic insulation for a minute. We basically filled all the walls surrounding this room, from the bathroom on the other side, from the kitchen on the other side. Talk to me about your sound insulation products.
Yeah, so anytime you have an interior wall, you want to put a fiberglass bat in there. For residential, I mean, our R13 is a great product that fits a 2x4 wall. It's going to friction fit in there. It's going to give you those acoustic benefits. Yep. A very similar product is what's used in all commercial builds. And that's, you know, with steel studs, a little bit wider bat, but it's the same product, same concept. It's going to help reduce, you know, your noise transfer from one room to the other.
Yeah, and it's an unfaced bat, right? We don't want any vapor. We don't want to think about, hey, are we stopping or slowing down vapor transport? So unfaced bat, and we could have used an R11 or an R13 because we really, frankly, don't care about the R value. It's an interior wall. The temperature should be the same on the side. The idea is we're filling that cavity, and we want to touch the drywall on both sides. So when that drywall vibrates because of my talking, we don't want that hollow core vibrating and transferring that noise to the other drywall. So by putting that fiberglass in that cavity, it stops those vibrations. Now we did a couple other things that aren't Owens Corning products. You notice we put putty pads also in our electrical outlets because we don't want any air to flow from one side of the wall to the other. Even the smallest hole between rooms, even if it was concrete between those rooms, I could literally talk to you on the other side of a concrete wall tray if I had a little 1/2-inch hole in the wall. Yeah. You would hear that sound transmission. So we need to think about beyond just drywall or fiberglass or whatever. We need to think about all those other minor things that make a difference. And lastly, the guys are just about set up in here. In fact, we got to get out of here. They're about to get working again. They're going to be doing some between floor bats, which I like when I've got a kid's bed above a parent's bed. Yeah. So we're going to be using some tiger paws, I think is kind of the industry name. Yeah. It's basically a clothes hanger, for lack of a better term, a piece of metal that we kind of bend, and we're going to pin those bats up to the floor. It's going to drop that sound a little bit. You got to be a little cautious not to oversell this to your clients in terms of how much sound dampening you're going to get out of it. There is a slippery slope in saying it's worth it, but it's going to be zero noise. That's not always true, right? So we got to be a little cautious when we talk about soundproofing, but that certainly will make a difference.
And if you think about two of the big trends in building today, it's open concept and it's hard surfaces.
Yep.
Both of those are terrible for acoustics, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So what we're doing is fighting some of these trends to make it more comfortable to be there and less intrusive.
Yeah.
Now, you're right. Sometimes the second floor, you'll get some of those vibrations through, but you won't hear the conversation, the TV, whatever else is going on.
Footfalls are the thing that tends to be the hardest to dampen, especially if I have, let's say, hardwood floors up there and we have a hard surface with people that are running or pounding or jumping or jump roping or whatever up there. But that constant noise of a radio or a conversation, that's the kind of stuff that we can dampen through that floor. Trey, appreciate you coming, man. Yeah. Owens Corning makes a great range of products, from our lowest cost to some of the absolute best products you can get in the industry, which I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of natural polymers and that closed cell. To have that in this house, I've used that product before. I really, really like it. Let's let the crew get back to work. We'll do a final walkthrough. When we get everything finished, we can show you guys what the house looks like. All right, friends, time to close out the video. Installation is totally complete. And as a side note, we've got Build Show Live coming here, gosh, in less than a week. So let me show you what we did on installation. I'm gonna make some kind of final notes in this video to leave you with a few takeaways, so to speak. So you can see in the garage here, just standard bat insulation. Remember, this garage was all framed with 2x4s. So this is just some inexpensive R13 bats, nothing special. Really our least cost insulation. Now, on the other hand, the attic in the garage, we insulated the exact same way we did the rest of the house. This is going to be a conditioned garage. We've already installed it over here. You can see I've got a carrier mini split in the ceiling right there, with the idea being in Texas, we don't have basements, so garages end up becoming the Costco pantry, the place where you're going to do some crafts. Oftentimes, I'll even use my laptop in the garage and get some work done in a quiet space at my house. So this is a nice garage. Insulate it, air condition it, make it real usable space. The other thing we did on the garage is the separating wall. We've talked about this a bunch in previous episodes. This wall here is zip R6. So we are insulated from the house to the garage. So if they don't want to insulate the garage, or pardon me, if they don't want to heat and cool the garage, they don't have to, or they can do it to a much lower standard. In the summertime, at my house, I might keep my garage at 82 degrees just to kind of knock the heat down, but my house thermostat's at 72, let's say. So it's totally okay, and this is going to be our perfect air barrier. Now let's go through my construction door and show you what we did on the inside of the house. And I've said this before, but just to remind you, this entire project, we're trying to build this really well, but where it makes sense, we're going to cut back on the budget and maybe choose some things that are really good, but maybe not the most expensive choice. So with that being said, we did not insulate the whole inside of the house with closed cell foam, at least not on the walls, but we did this wall separating the house from the garage. And here's the reason why. This wall separating the house from the garage is a really critical wall. we want to make sure that all the stuff that could be in the garage, whether it's somebody who pulled their car in and let it run for 5 minutes before shutting it off, or somebody that was not being smart and kept the gasoline or something in there, we want to make sure all of those things are kept in the garage and not brought into the house. It's the reason why you never see us putting HVAC systems in garages, because they're going to pick up that and dump it right into the house, right? We have a separate HVAC for the garage and a separate HVAC for the house. Believe it or not, there's a lot of houses that have been built and are currently being built with the house's AC in the garage because that's the space to put it. Not a good idea. But the point is, we use closed cell, which is more expensive, just in this wall separating the house from the garage. Now, on the other hand, I did use closed cell in the band joist area or the rim joist area. Whether that rim joist is in the basement or in between two floors like we've got here, I really think that spray foam in particular is an excellent choice. Bats and blown-in are really hard to do well there, so we did spend the money to do closed cell foam in that rim joist. Now, the rest of the house, though, we varied quite a bit or kind of dropped the budget down quite a bit. This is that blown-in insulation. This is the front porch wall, and you're going to notice that we did most of the first floor in blown-in insulation. When it comes to the kind of Owens Corning lineup, I really like this blown-in insulation because it's a little less dependent on having a great installer. Whereas when we do bat insulation, we've got to worry about cutting around outlets and really doing a good job with wires and plumbing pipes. It's just a lot more labor intense, and I'm really wanting to get a grade A install, which is the highest grade. So I like this because you can see the guys netted it. They just poked a hole in there and they filled the entire bat. Now we also have a slightly higher R value, right? In the garage, we use the real basic bat, R13. These have an effective R value of R15. And actually, this is probably a good point to talk about the math a little bit. Just because this cavity is insulated with R15 doesn't mean that this wall is automatically an R15 wall. We need to think about the other factors involved. For instance, all these studs, that blocking, this header right here, all those things drop the effective R value of the wall. So I did the math here real quick. R15 cavity insulation, but don't forget our studs in the walls. These 2x4 studs on the exterior here are around R4.6. And the studs on this traditional framing, 16-inch on center, are approximately 20% of the wall. So if we were to kind of stack the studs and think about the overall square footage of the walls, headers, the whole shebang, that'd be about 20% of the wall. And then don't forget, we used on this project an exterior insulation that was part of the sheathing. Go check that episode out. But Huber's Zip System sheathing, we used the R6 sheathing, which is actually R6.6. That's kind of cool. So if you were to take the math on all those, the effective R value of this wall is actually around R17 to R18 in totality. Think of that as like U factor of a window that takes the total effect of everything is around R17 to 18. I really like that. That's a good wall. That feels really good for my climate zone. However, if you're building in a really cold climate zone or a more, what should I say, a tougher climate, right, that gets colder or has bigger extremes, I have a hard time here in Texas getting more than 20 or 30 degrees from my set point temperature. Sure, it gets to be 100 out, but that's really only maybe 30 degrees from my set point, and it hardly ever gets below 40 or so here. So I have, in kind of relative nature, I have a mild climate. For you watching this in Minnesota and Vancouver and Detroit, you guys regularly see 10 degrees outside, or even maybe minus 10 degrees outside. You might have as much as 80 degrees delta between your thermostat set point and the outside temperature. That's why we wanted to frame and build at least one wall that what I would consider to be a really good priced value wall for the builders in the north, and that's this wall right here. So let's take a look at this. This wall framed with 2x6s, and we put R19 bats in here. So just a real basic bat. We didn't even go up to the blown in. We didn't go to the R21 high density bat, just an R19 bat. These studs are 2x6s, and a 2x6 is approximately R6.9. Wood does have thermal resistance. We don't cook our eggs on a wood pan, right? Because it wouldn't transfer the heat very well. These studs framed conventionally are about 20% of the wall area. Now this wall though has exterior insulation on it. Check out my other videos, but I did 2 layers of 1.5" Atlas insulation on the outside. Each layer is R10, so I actually have R20 on the back side of this wall. So the effective R value of this wall, factoring all that, is actually like R35 to R36. That's really good. And if you're in a really cold climate, a place that has extreme, this is the wall that you'd want to build this exact house in. And by the way, the plans for this house, framing it in 2x6 instead of 2x4 is no big deal because all that's available through the Builders FirstSource digital tools. You know, they've got bldrplans.com where you can see this plan, or you can see the plan for my personal house. You could build this exact house. You could also modify it however you want. They've got the ability to modify that for you. But if you're building the north, this would be the kind of wall that I would consider building. With that being said, let's go take a quick tour upstairs because I want to show you just a couple of quick things as we walk. So on the other side of this wall is that master bedroom. You can see we just used some inexpensive sound bat insulation there to combat noise going through these walls. And then when we get up to these bedrooms up here, we also did sound bat insulation inside these beds. So come on up here. This is going to be probably a kid's bedroom, and we sound batted here. Now we did do this wall though in closed cell foam. This is a wall that is a shear wall on the back of the house, and it's been a little bit cut up because I've got a roof line that intersects with it. Actually, let's walk back to the hallway so I can show you that. So if you look at that girder truss coming through that floor line there, then you can kind of see the outline of the triangle for that other attic. That wall has a little bit of a reduction in shear value because there's just not a full wall there. I've got that girder truss in the way, and I've got the attic. So by adding that spray foam, I've actually added to the structural integrity of the wall. Some engineers will give you a value for that. We didn't necessarily account for that, but that was one of those things where I said, look, it's worth spending a little extra on this wall to really make sure that we've got good shear value on this wall. Even though we're framed with full R6 zip R sheathing on the outside, we nailed it to the zip patterns that the engineer specifies. This is one wall that I did want to upgrade. And then lastly, the ceilings above us here are not insulated for heat transfer. This is sound bat insulation, and this is just standard. You can see the printing on there. R13 bats, just like we'd use in the walls of the garage. Inexpensive bats. We put them in the ceiling line. Once we get our USG brand sheetrock in place, they'll be held in there. And the idea is we're just trying to muffle and kind of stop the noise transfer from anything that might be in the attic. Now we've got pretty quiet equipment. This is carrier equipment. It's VRF. I've got a dehumidifier and I've got a fresh air system up there, but it's nice to stop that. Now I didn't spend that money out here in the family room. I didn't spend that money in the closets or in the kids' baths. I simply did it in the bedrooms. With that being said, guys, hopefully you learned something here. I think the big takeaway for me would be, you know, if you use a good exterior insulation like Zip R or standard Zip with exterior insulation like Atlas that we used here, it gives you a lot of options, a lot of flexibility for building a really tight house from an air perspective, a really well insulated house, and then you can take advantage of something like this Owens Corning blown in fiberglass that gives us an R15 and a 2x4 wall, or an R21 and a 2x6 wall. We don't have to go to the most expensive option. Hopefully you guys learned something. This was a super fun episode. I really want to say a big thanks to Owens Corning for sponsoring. We used a lot of different products showcased from their least expensive probably to their most expensive options on the house. But I think if you look at what we did here, I think we kind of did it with a little bit of jurisprudence, you know, really thinking about where things should be spent and how we should spend that money. Check out the rest of the videos in this series. This has been a super fun series on this build with our friends at Builders FirstSource. And as I mentioned earlier, the plans for this particular house are available at bldrplans.com. They've been great to work with, and you could modify this house or choose from. I think they've got well over 100 other homes in that library that you could choose from. And they've got really, I think, very well-priced plans on there that, again, they can modify all those plans. With that being said, guys, I appreciate your time. Go check out our other videos, and we'll see you next time on the Reisinger Build.